Hello, welcome to the Satir model video 3. So this is a set of slides that will share with us on the Satir model, and we are into video 3. Thank you so much for coming for this training. And today we're going to look at the coping stances in a deeper way. We'll also look at survival stances from our childhood and how they impacted us. Thirdly, we'll look at the communication between human beings and know how to help use the Satir model to apply to communication. We'll talk about metacommunication, what is incongruent communication, congruent communication, and finally, we'll learn how to use the 5 A's to counsel our clients. So thank you again for coming for this training. I really appreciate you watching this video, and I hope it will be helpful for you. So a quick background and recap. The Satir model falls under the humanistic family therapy models. And Virginia Satir, her contribution was that she was the leading humanistic family therapist. She was innovative and she pioneered new ideas during a time when the emphasis was on psychopathology, on what made people ill. In contrast, she spoke about a human being's desire for deep connection, growth, and she helped individuals and families communicate better and more congruently. Her emphasis was on raising the individual's self-worth, self-esteem, and also in helping the family to grow closer and to self-actualize. This was so that they could have better, healthier whole relationships as an individual by themselves and also as a family unit. She pioneered the personal iceberg intrapsychic model, which we learned in video 2. If you've not seen that video, you can go back to video 2 to watch that. Her common assumptions and practices were that one, the model is experiential. Secondly, it targets emotional transactions, meaning that there's a focus on family and relationships and attachment. Third, there's an emphasis on warmth and empathy. In the tradition of Carl Rogers, she emphasizes sincerity, warmth, positive unconditional regard, respect for the client, and she wants to bring out the best in the client and to help clients and families self-actualize. That is one reason that I really love her model so much. Also, there's a stress on the counselor's use of self. There's also an individual and family focus, as well as functioning and setting goals at the individual and family level. Her major contribution to psychotherapy and family therapy was that she came up with the coping stances. As mentioned in video 2, the unhelpful coping stances are blaming, placating, super-reasonal, and irrelevant. The helpful coping stance is to have a congruent coping stance and a congruent communication. This was taught in video 2, and you can go back to video 2 to revise, or if you've not watched video 2, you can click on video 2. Now, how do people develop the communication stances or the coping stances? When people feel emotionally threatened or under stress when they were children and growing up, whenever they felt unsafe, they learned these stances from the family of origin. This was Satir's belief, and it is indeed a very powerful concept that when we understand that whenever we feel unsafe in a current situation, when we are under stress or feel threatened, we revert to the coping stances of blaming, placating, super reasonable, or irrelevant, because we learned these stances from our family of origin in our childhood. So, we learn these coping stances primarily in life in relation to one person in the family or several people in the family. We learn from them that stance. For example, if our dad was very blaming, we will copy the blaming stance of our dad. And if our mom was very placating, we will that placating stance. We could also use a complete complementary stance. For example, we may use a placating stance in order to please our father. So, for example, if let's say our father is shouting and very angry, we may try to placate him by acting cute or being submissive or just obeying whatever he says without actually raising our own feelings or talking about our own needs or talking about our own thoughts or feelings. So we totally negate ourselves. We placate so that we can keep the peace. This happens in many families. And so this role modeling by parents sets the scene for this primary triad of father, mother, and child, and how we learn from them this coping stance. We do try to be congruent, but under stress, we will revert to the blaming stance, placating stance, super reasonable stance, or irrelevant stance when we are threatened or feel under stress. If we are not self-aware, we will also use these stances. So we need to learn to be congruent. And this is a process. So we want to learn this by using the 5 A's. This will be taught later in the video. So please stay on and watch to the end because that will be presented right at the end of this video. When we were children, we learned ways to survive when we were young, when we did not feel safe. So, for example, if we are not allowed to get angry in our family of origin, where only the father could get angry, shout, and scream, we then internalize a family rule that I cannot get angry even when I'm an adult. I cannot show my anger in my own family that I set up, or I cannot show my anger in work because that would create problems and tension. Another example is we can learn and develop a placating stance where we ignore our own thoughts and feelings, we discount ourselves, and only focus on the thoughts and feelings of the other person to keep peace. This happens in many families where one family member, it could be the father or the mother, uses placating in order to keep the peace, but they do not ever really show their true feelings or thoughts. And they feel very incongruent, frustrated, angry, and maybe depressed. Satir believes that when we get people to learn how to be congruent and communicate in a congruent way, to be authentic, to be real, that's when we actually are able to have good self-worth, good self-esteem, when we extend compassion to ourselves, and we are empowered because we actually make that choice to know how to be congruent. Because whenever we are hiding behind a facade or repressing or suppressing or denying our true thoughts and feelings and not able to be our real self, that's when we feel a lot of frustration, anger, or sadness. For placators, many placators come for counseling, so their strength is that they're very kind and caring. But their weakness is they ignore their own needs, thoughts, and feelings. Thus, our goal as counselors, when we're working with clients who use a placating stance, is to empower them to acknowledge themselves, to have a sense of self and a voice, not to just give up their own thoughts and feelings because they're worried about having conflict. A little bit more about how to work with clients with placating stance. I've worked with many clients who were in abusive relationships with their boyfriend or husband, and they use placating as a way to cope. In working with them, I would appreciate their strengths. I would give them positive affirmation for their strengths. And I would also ask them, how do you feel about this? What do you think about this? What is your wish and what is your dream? So we need to help them to actually share their thoughts and feelings and affirm this, that these thoughts and feelings are valid. In the blaming stance, clients who use this blaming stance will exert their own needs and desires. They minimize, discount, leave out, and ignore other people's needs, thoughts, and feelings. Thus, my goal as a counselor in working with such clients is to help them to develop empathy for others. We need to help clients who use a blaming stance to develop empathy and an awareness of the needs of others. So an example would be, I could ask a man who is using a very blaming stance towards his girlfriend or wife, how do you think that would make your girlfriend feel when you hit her? How would you feel if someone hit you? Another example could be, what do you think is the need of your wife in this relationship? Or another example would be, what needs does your wife have that she feels are not being met in this relationship? The ones with super reasonable, for these clients, when they're under stressed or threatened, they will revert to the context. So this is an external system of logic or black and white way of thinking that is overly rigid, logical, legalistic, and is very structured and unyielding. It does not take into account emotions, feelings, and even themselves. For the irrelevant stance, when they're under stressed or threatened, they revert to distraction. So they would be, example, the class clown. They will change the topic or they'll distract with humor when the situation or relationship is under stress. They want to distract from the tension in the room. An extreme form of this is schizophrenia, where schizophrenics are not in touch with anyone's self or reality. Schizophrenia is a mental illness where there is a genetic component and it does need to be treated with medication and counseling. However, it is also possible to reach schizophrenia, people with schizophrenia, through a very deep connection and by having an emotionally safe space where the counselor can listen to the feelings of the schizophrenic and talk with them in such a way that is nurturing. Satir worked very well with schizophrenics, and because she is so nurturing and she is so caring and has such a great connection, she was able to get them to share out their feelings and thoughts. And I've worked with clients with schizophrenia as well, and it is true that when we use ourself and the connection, and we are able to provide a safe space, the client with schizophrenia can be a bit more grounded and be in touch with themselves and their thoughts and feel free and safe to express those thoughts and feelings because they feel accepted by the counselor. The goal for working with clients with an irrelevant stance is to help them to engage with the topic and not to distract. In real life, there are many clients who are without mental illness or mental issues, but who use irrelevance as a way to cope. So we need to teach them to center and ground. Example of this could be a boyfriend or husband in a relationship, and in his relationship with his wife or girlfriend, he is always joking, but he does not want to talk about his own feelings and his own thoughts, and he does not connect with the thoughts and feelings of his wife or children, and he just is very irrelevant. And this makes the wife feel frustrated. So how do we use Satir in counseling? First, we can understand the coping stances. Secondly, we can use this model to understand our client better. Third, we know how to intervene. For example, in working with the placator, we need to understand that they are generally very nice clients. And because they're so placating, they tend to agree with the counselor in everything that the counselor says. So it's very important that as counselors, we give them various options and ask them to give their opinions, their thoughts, and to make the choices. Because they tend to want to please, so they may say okay to everything that is suggested. It's important to brainstorm with them so that they come up with the answers. They come up with options, perspectives, and they are able to voice their thoughts and feelings in a healthy manner, in an open manner. We want to empower them to assert their needs in a healthy way, not in an aggressive, blaming way, but we can empower them to learn to use congruent communication and to speak in an assertive manner. More will be taught about this at the end of the video, so please do watch until the end of this video. Now, for blamers, the counselor can use a direct counseling communication style because blamers like to have direct communication. They'll say, don't sugarcoat it, just tell me directly. So you can strengthen your therapeutic relationship by being upfront. Whereas for super reasonable clients, we have to, as counselors, refer to their worldview. We'll need to explore them, their thoughts, logic, and understand how they organize and see the world. We reach them through their cognition. So, example of a question we could ask the husband or boyfriend who is very super reasonable is, what do you think is the problem in the relationship? And how do you think this problem can be solved? Another example could be, if you keep relating to her in this very super reasonable way and only focus on logic and thoughts, do you think that that is helping or hurting your relationship? How might it be hurting your relationship? And how could you change that so that you have a more stronger relationship? Help them learn to acknowledge their own needs and emotions, even when it's not logical. And teach them as well to acknowledge the needs and desires of others. Other people's thoughts and feelings are valid, even when it's not logical. For example, you could explain to them when somebody is grieving. For example, if their wife is grieving over the passing of the wife's mother, and the person who is super reasonable, the husband, is not really able to understand that and be in tune with that, you could ask him, how do you think your wife is impacted by her mother's death? Might you consider that she would feel very sad and that she needs to grieve and mourn? It may seem to you that death is a part of life and that everybody passes away. However, I'm wondering whether you can acknowledge that it is very normal to grieve and that she needs to have you also comfort her and journey with her in this process of grieving. How might you show comfort to her in a way that would meet her needs? So in this way, you're acknowledging the context, you're acknowledging his own thoughts, his own belief systems, and you're also helping him to acknowledge the needs and desires of his wife, as well as her thoughts and feelings in that context of grieving for her husband, for her grandmother, for her mother. So how do we use it in counseling? For the irrelevant client, the counselor needs to create emotional safety. We want to teach them to recognize their own feelings, thoughts, and other people's feelings, thoughts, and contexts. Not to be scared, not to be afraid of vulnerability, but to stay with the current reality. We want to help them to understand that they do not need to crack a joke all the time or to change the topic, but that they can actually just stay with the situation to center and to ground. So, for example, a question that we could ask them is, how are you feeling right now about your husband and how he is getting angry so often and shouting at you and the children? It's okay to be vulnerable. Just share me your true feelings. This is a safe emotional space for you to share. And then you really listen as a counselor and you really hold that space and you empathize with her and reflect back her feelings. Sounds like you feel really upset and scared when your husband is shouting at you and the kids, and you feel very lousy. I empathize. It's a very difficult situation. I hope these examples of how you reflect feelings and how you work with the different coping stances have been helpful. Fourth, how we can apply it in counseling is that we understand how the different roles interact in the family system. For example, what is the coping stance of the father? He could be a blamer. Mom could be a placater. The oldest son could be a blamer and super reasonable. The second daughter could be a placater. The third son could be irrelevant. There's also a primary coping stance and a secondary coping stance. So, for example, for the oldest son, he might have blaming as the first coping stance, and he might also have a secondary coping stance, which is super reasonable. The fifth application is we can help our clients to be willing to open up and work towards congruent coping stances. So clients who are able to be authentic, express their true thoughts and feelings, and willing to be vulnerable will learn that it is okay to be vulnerable in the context of an emotionally safe relationship. It is very hard to be vulnerable sometimes or often because we are afraid of being put down, of being rejected, of not being accepted. It's very important that as counselors, we help our clients know experientially that counseling is an emotionally safe space, that the counselor is an emotionally safe person who is credible and skilled and is a professional. The sixth application is that it is important for us ourselves as counselors or therapists, as professionals, to be self-aware, to work on ourselves, to keep growing, to understand what is my own coping stance and to move towards congruence. This is because Satir emphasized the counselor's use of self, but it's very important that we ourselves are genuine, in touch with our own thoughts and feelings, other people's thoughts and feelings, and also in touch with the context and able to communicate in a way that is healthy and empowering. If you found the content helpful so far, please do like, share, and subscribe. And also please do press the notification button so that you can get more new videos when they come by. In summary, the three takeaways from the first part of this video is that we learned that the coping stances of blaming, placating, super reasonable, and irrelevant originate from survival stances that we learned from our childhood, from our family of origin. In situations when we felt threatened or unsafe, we revert to them under stress, or when we feel threatened and unsafe in a current context. So we want to help our clients work towards congruent coping stance. Thirdly, we want to be self-aware. What is our own coping stance and to move towards congruence. These previous slides were taught in video 2, and you can watch video 2 again if you would like to revise them or if you've not watched it before. In this next section, I'm going to talk about the intrapersonal relationship between people and how you can use the intrapsychic personal model of the iceberg to help understand this intrapersonal relationship, interaction, communication. So when two people interact, example, the counselor and the counselee, or a husband and wife, a parent and child, parent and family members, or boss and employee, what happens is that the two icebergs are meeting. and they are in contact with each other. So the husband and wife, the parent and child, and the father, mother, son, daughter interacting with you as a counselor, a friend and another friend, as well as a boss and employee, are all interacting with each other. And if you want to understand the other person much better and at a very deep level, then what you want to do is to look beyond the coping stances and what is the behavior above the waterline and look at what is below the waterline, which is 9/10. Just like an iceberg, what is below the waterline, the 9/10, is what is the person thinking, feeling, and their perceptions, their expectations, their yearnings, and their sense of self. And this will help you to understand the other person at a very deep level, especially if you look at their yearnings, their wishes, their dreams. Now, when people are communicating, we often will have incongruent communication. Satir taught that there is communication about communication, or what is called metacommunication. So words alone do not always convey the true feeling. Instead, it is our body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, and energy that conveys the real feelings. When there is a mismatch between the words and the body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, and energy. So, for example, let's say someone said to you, I'm not angry that you forgot my birthday. I'm not angry that you forgot my birthday. And the person is shouting, pounding the table, looking very upset. Then you know that the person, if you look at the real meaning, you look at the person's body language, facial expression, tone of voice, and energy, and you will know that the person is angry, the person is upset, but they are communicating incongruently, perhaps to hide their true feelings, and perhaps because in their family of origin, the rule was that you cannot express anger. Now, examples of incongruent communication is that the true meaning is often lost and there is a mixed message, there's confusion. This can result in alienation because the listener does not hear the message and maybe the concern or love, but they only hear the anger when there's no match between the words and the non-verbals or energy. For example, a father shouting at the son or daughter, I love you. Don't you know that I love you? That's why I'm shouting at you. Or a sarcastic tone when you put down the other person. For example, oh, you're so clever. You're so smart, right? You just know everything. I really admire you because you're so smart. All right. So you hear someone speaking like that, you know that they don't believe the other person is smart. They're actually being sarcastic, right? Now, in unhelpful communication, what happens is the person often uses an accusatory tone or words, and this is unhelpful. They accuse the other person and they will blame. They'll dig up the past, things from long ago. They'll use absolutes like you're always doing this. You don't want to use these methods because they'll alienate the listener and the listener cannot hear what you're trying to say or convey, and it will shut down the communication and it will spoil the relationship. And then there will be a roadblock, there will be a wall that will be put up. So we want to tear down that wall. We want to have an open communication. We want to really connect and be able to work on the issues. So we don't want to use all these unhelpful methods. We want to keep our tone low and calm. It's not easy, I empathize, but can take a deep breath and say to ourselves in our self-talk, okay, keep calm and carry on. We don't want to shout because it's very aggressive and it will cause the other person to stop listening. So for our nonverbals, facial expression, body language, we want to make sure that we keep it calm and we don't want to use words such as, you're always forgetting my birthday and you're always so sloppy. The house looks like a rubbish dump. Why are you so lazy and messy? it's all your fault. I am a very unhappy person, right? So if you use such words, obviously the other person is going to feel very blamed and they're not going to be happy, and the relationship is not going to be a cordial or harmonious one. Examples of congruent communication is when what you see is what you get, and the person is able to express calmly, non-reactively what they feel inside. The words match the nonverbals, the body language, the facial expression, the tone, and the energy. There's no hiding and no faking. You don't need to hide behind a facade, and you're not repressing or suppressing your true thoughts and feelings, but you're able to take into account the needs of yourself, others, and the context. And very importantly, you're able to communicate politely, calmly, and assertively. You're able to communicate politely, calmly, and assertively. You're non-reactive. So in using non-blaming language, you would use I statements. You would take into account self, others, and the context. You would express your needs in a calm, assertive, non-blaming manner. Share the facts why it is important and work towards common goals. You can help your clients to learn all these skills. Ourselves as counselors, we can also apply this to ourselves, and we can also be non-reactive when there's transference and counter-transference in a counseling relationship. So we need to take a deep breath to center and ground so that we can connect with our client at a very congruent way, and in a very congruent way, and also in a non-reactive manner. So, and more elaboration on how you can teach your client how to communicate congruently. For example, you would use I statements. Example would be, I feel upset that you forgot my birthday. Can you please write down this date so that we can celebrate together in future? Our relationship is important to me, and I hope we can spend some time together even though you're very busy at work. Let's set aside a date night so that we can spend some quality time together. Okay, so you could maybe work with your client, for example, the wife or the husband, and this you could teach them, how to speak in a way that takes into account their own needs, the self, the other person's needs, the other, and the dilemma or conflict, situation, challenge, or situation they're in, which is the context. So, for example, if we look at the I statement, I feel upset that you forgot my birthday. That is taking into account their own needs, their own feelings. Can you please write down the dates so that we can celebrate together in future? Is brainstorming how they can solve the problem and how they can include each other in this solution. Our relationship is important to me. Again, stating the client's own needs. I hope we can spend some time together, even though you're busy at work. Stating the other person's needs and situation and the context, the busyness at work. Let's set aside a date night so that we can spend quality time together. Again, taking into account the self and the others and a possible solution. So the congruent communication needs to be one where both parties work together to meet in the middle. They negotiate and they meet both their needs in a positive, non-blaming, non-manipulative way. This can apply to friendships that are platonic, to dating relationships, and also to a professional context such as work, where you have two peers working together in a work relationship to meet a project, or a boss and a subordinate working together. They can use I statements in congruent communication so that you are able to state your own needs, the other person's needs, the context, and find a solution that meets in the middle, where both are negotiating and meeting each other's needs in a non-blaming, non-manipulative, realistic, and positive way. Another example for what a wife or husband could say to each other, let us work together to clean the house. We are a team, and this will make the environment clean and pleasant for both of us. I know you're busy, and I appreciate what you're doing for me and our family. Right? So in this way, as we teach our clients how to use words like I appreciate, and it will also empower the client, the other person listening, and help the relationship improve. Oftentimes, we take each other for granted. It is in our most intimate relationships, people we are closest to, for example, our dad, mom, our daughter, son, our husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, or best friends, that we may have higher expectations, and yet, ironically, at the same time, we may treat them in a way that is very much taken for granted, taking the other person for granted, and we may speak in a rude way, in a very way that is blaming even. So we want to be mindful. We want to always remember that we need to respect the other person. We want to value the other person. We want to appreciate the other person. We want to meet in the middle, work together, and speak in non-blaming, non-manipulative, positive ways. So we want to keep in mind, working towards congruence is a process. We are always learning. So be kind, compassionate, patient, loving to yourself and others, and don't judge yourself. We are all growing. It takes time, self-awareness, mindfulness, but it's always worth the journey as we reap the rewards, as we begin to appreciate ourselves and others more and more, and we build quality, happy relationships. We want to make sure that when we are communicating, we stay grounded, centered, calm. Don't say things we regret later. Remember, don't take each other for granted. Value the relationship. Think about possible solutions and what works. What works is very important, and what can move the issue forward for both parties. Think of a win-win solution. So we want to empower ourselves to know our choose to be self-aware, congruent, and use congruent communication. It is a choice ultimately, and we cannot blame another person for our unhappiness. We are our own choice makers. So God loves us. We can always remember and be reassured that when we feel down or sad, the good news says, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I've drawn you with unfailing kindness. Jeremiah 31:3. So you are greatly loved and valued, unique and special. We need always to love, value, and appreciate ourselves. Only when we love ourselves can we love others. In conclusion, I'm going to teach now on the 5 A's. What are the 5 A's? They are 1, awareness, 2, acknowledge, 3, accept, 4, appreciate, and 5, act. As counselors, we want to help our clients know how to use these 5 A's. First, we need to be aware. Only when we have awareness of ourselves and of others and the situation, when we know how to handle the issue, can there be a breakthrough. If we do not know what is actually the real issue, how can we work on it? Secondly, we want to acknowledge. We want to acknowledge what are the thoughts and feelings of the other person, of myself, of the context. We want to acknowledge what is really bugging the other person, what is bugging me. We want to really validate that, okay? Because when we do not validate, when we minimize, discount, and we dismiss the feelings, thoughts, and needs and desires of the other person, or we deny our own desires, we deny our own thoughts, feelings, that's when we feel frustrated, we feel angry. Third, we want to help our clients to accept that this is me, accept myself as a person, and also if the client is sometimes struggling with an issue, They can say, I don't like it, but I accept it. It can also be very liberating. Fourth, we want to help the client appreciate, that is, understand why this happened, and also appreciate themselves, their own strengths. And finally, five, we want to help them to act. It could be, something that they can do to help themselves so that they are not so placating, blaming, super reasonable or irrelevant. We want to help them to understand that this is something which they have the power. So when they have the power to do this, they take back the power for themselves. They are empowering themselves. In conclusion, the three key points that we learned from this segment is: one, what is incongruent communication? Two, what is congruent communication? And three, how you can use the 5 A's to help clients. One takeaway is that you can use the 5 A's in understanding ourselves as therapists and also in helping our clients. I will invite you to journal how you can help yourself by applying this in your own life to a situation that you are perhaps wrestling with, and how you can use this in helping your client. What are the questions that you could ask the client to help them to have: one, awareness; two, acknowledge; three, accept; four, appreciate or understand why; and five, act. You could also practice your skills by using reflection of feelings, validation of feelings, acknowledgement of thoughts and feelings, and helping them to understand what are their strengths. So ask the client what are their strengths, talents, gifts, and abilities, and give them positive affirmation for that. These are the references. And again, a gentle reminder, please, that this teaching ministry is not intended to replace therapy and counseling. You should seek counseling from trained professionals for any issues you're facing. You are precious and you're valuable and loved. So please, I hope that you will have a wonderful week ahead. If this video was helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. And I thank you again for really listening in to video 3, and I hope that you will be able to benefit from what is taught here. Do look out for video 4 that will come up soon. Thank you so much and have a wonderful week ahead.